I'm continue again. This is Arlene,
Hi, this is Gowri.
and today we are going to do poetry reading. And today we selected a poetry by Maya Angelou. She was a very prominent author, historian, songwriter, playwright, dancer, stage and screen producer, director, performer, singer, and civil rights activist. So she has contributed a lot in terms of providing writing and producing poetries that really touch the hearts of many. And for today's poem that we selected is a poem that is a very popular one. It's called Still I Rise. You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may throw me in the very dirt, but still, like dust, I'll rise.
Does my sassiness upset you? Why are you beset with gloom? 'Cause I walk like I've got oil wells pumping in my living room.
Just like moons and like suns, with the certainty of tides, just like hopes springing high, still I'll rise.
Did you want to see me broken? Bowed head and lowered eyes, shoulders falling down like teardrops, weakened by my soulful cries.
Does my heightiness offended you? Don't you take it awfully hard? 'Cause I'll laugh like I've got gold mines digging in my own backyard.
You may shoot me with your words, you may cut me with your eyes, you may kill me with your hatefulness, but still, like air, I'll rise.
Does my sexiness upset you? Does it come as a surprise that I'll dance like I got diamonds at a meeting of my tides?
Out of the huts of history's shame, I rise, up from a past that's rooted in pain. I rise, I'm a black ocean, leaping and wide, welling and swelling, I bear in the tide, leaving behind nights of terror and fear. I rise, into a daybreak that's wondrously clear. I rise, bringing the gifts that my ancestor gave. I am the dream and the hope of the slave. I rise, I rise, I rise.
So that was the poem written by Maya Angelou. And to me, I felt the poem is really um, spiritually enlightening and also awakening in a way, because in a way, like, I think she felt that being a woman in I mean, this is my interpretation of the poem. I think
Mhm.
that she being a woman in an era where women were not allowed to speak, especially women of color, and or not allowed to be visible, and it seems like she is determined to rise no matter what. She do not want to be let down by her looks. That's why she talk about sexiness, or and also the way the world view her. She will rise and rise and rise.
And also, this poem has actually the history of the African American people when they were first taken to the United States as slaves, and they had a very what you call, they were discriminated and they were not treated as equals. And she uses words like black ocean, leaping and white metaphors to show how hard they've been fighting to overcome all this oppression. And
Hmm.
but of course, the poem is not just limited to them. It applies to anywhere in the world where people are being oppressed and discriminated because of their history or because of their skin color in that sense.
Hmm. And I think for her, being a woman of color, she also see that the oppressor that she has to overcome are those that are of men. I think that's why, and men of other colors maybe, because her poem addresses issues like racism, criticism, and sexism, and also personal obstacles in her life that she has to overcome um, with pride and grace. And like you say, is historically rooted in dimensions of slavery, which is, I think, something that a lot of African Americans felt strongly about, in a way that their ancestors have to face so many hardship in order for them to be free as men and women.
And it also goes back to women empowerment, of course, when,
Hmm.
like you mentioned earlier, she was talking about, does my haughtiness offend you? Does my sassiness upset you? Does my sexiness offend you? And it also addresses the problem of sexism and oppression of women in particular, which is, I think, still happening up till today. This
Hmm.
poem is still very relevant to our current society.
Hmm. If I want to relate to our current society, I think it is still very much relevant, even though she was born in 1928, and she died just recently in 2014. But and I think she wrote this poem during her heydays, her early heydays. But it is still relevant now because women, regardless woman of color or white woman or even Asian woman in a sense, we
Mhm.
still face the day-to-day oppression in a way that is very subtle, especially towards our own existence as a woman. Like she mentioned a lot about her sexiness and does it offend other people.
And
Uh, Sorry.
I was going to say that women, especially in Asia, I think
Hmm.
a lot of them are not aware of their rights. So even if they
Hmm.
are
Yeah,
aware,
that's true.
they are too afraid to speak up because we are so used to the patriarchal way of life that the man eventually gets the final say and who decides everything, especially when it comes to sexual desires and needs,
Mm.
where it's always about the men. It doesn't seem like women have a say, and they are just treated as objects to satisfy men, as objects of pleasure.
Hmm. And I like she uses words that I always thought that is a trendy word that usually young people would use.
Hmm.
She used the word like sassiness.
Hmm.
Like, to me, it is a way to show that, women at that era also, they want to feel that they are empowered, they are strong, and they also realize that the moment they feel that way or they appear to be so, it upsets the other gender, which is men. And I like when she wrote, "Cause I walk like I've got oil wells pumping in my living room."
Yes, and another part that I like is also because for me personally, I think as well, confidence is something that's very important. And I always believe that everyone should accept themselves as they are, accept all their strengths and weaknesses, accept all your flaws, and know what your advantages are, that your disadvantages are. And I like that she uses phrases like, you know, um, I dance like I've got diamonds at the meeting of my thighs, and also like you mentioned that I've got oil wells and gold mines, and it shows that she is completely comfortable with who she is as a person, and she is kind of like the ultimate uh, example of probably a strong, independent woman who will rise regardless of any obstacle that you throw in her way,
Mhm.
any aspect of discrimination or whatsoever that a lot of people would usually just probably step back and say, okay, there's too much discrimination going on. Maybe this is not for me. But she's not that kind of person. She would actually say, I will get past this. I will show everyone that it's possible for a woman to go this far and to achieve all this.
And I think because of that, she really inspired many people. A lot of my friends really admire her, even though um, she's someone that is not from our era. I think she speak to a lot of us in today's society, and even when it comes to slavery, one of the para that really I think highlighted on the history of slavery would be that part, out of the hearts of history's shame I rise, up from a past that's rooted in pain I rise. I'm a black ocean, leaping and wide, welling and swelling I bear in the tide. I think when she mentioned black ocean, she really embraced her color in a sense that she doesn't feel like she needs to be someone else to be able to be a real human being. And despite the history of her ancestor, she said that I think she wants to show that, just because we are women or men of color, we should not be bogged down by our history. Like, just because you came from a history or lineage of slaves doesn't mean you will continue to be slave. You should be a free man and woman. You should lead a life that you are proud of, and I think that really speaks a lot to today's society.
And also, according to this article that I have here, it says that, for example, a child may cry and whine to their parents so that their voices can be heard and they want to be understood, because you always want your voice to be heard in any situation at all, and trying to have your voice heard and trying to voice out your rights and all. It's not an easy thing. It requires a lot of courage, a lot of commitment, especially for a woman, and a woman back in her days. It's a very positive and encouraging thing that she's brave enough to overcome all the obstacle, and she showed us how strong she is and how determined she is to go for what she wants. And yeah, it's probably the woman who is a go-getter. When she wants something, she accomplishes it instead of sitting back and complaining about it.
But how do you link this with the world today, the society today? During her era, the situation that she faced would be of a totally different sort of environment. But in today's environment, although she really speaks to us, but what kind of issues that we can address by sort of admiring and absorbing the message of her poem?
Well, the poem is definitely very relevant in today's world, especially if I were to put it in context of Malaysia itself. I was reading a book by John Grisham, who is one of my favorite authors, and the book was called The Last Juror. And he very beautifully highlighted the struggle of the black people in a white community, starting from the schools, because back then white kids and black kids actually go to separate schools, and the people did not want those kids to mix. So he actually talked about how the first the bill came up, to integrate these kids, to send white kids and black kids to the same school, and a lot of people were not happy about that. Like, oh my God, my kid is gonna be mixing with this black kid. Like, what's gonna happen to them? And then also in terms of, because the book was about crime solving, and they were picking out their jury, and there was only one black woman, one black person chosen among all the 12 juries, and that also shows how the opinion of a black person is actually not taken seriously as compared to the white people. But they slowly got over that. They started integrating. They started getting to know each other. They started becoming, I would say, friends, neighbors, and they slowly got past it. And today is definitely not like back then. People are not like, oh, you can't have black friends, you can only have white friends, or you cannot mix with this kid or that kid. And I think we kind of had the same thing here in Malaysia, where when the British came here, they had this divide and rule, and the Malays were kept aside, the Chinese
And I think
were.
we still very much sort of didn't really progress from the day we gained independence. I mean, in terms of the mindset towards a much more open mindset, and especially towards our own identity. I think if I want to relate it in the Malaysian context, like you mentioned earlier, we are still very much divided. Maybe not by skin color, maybe by religion, but we are, or by social class as well. In a way that I think we still have yet to progress to the moment where we really rise from the past, which is we might not have a slavery past, of course, but we have a past where we were divided and we were colonized. But I think society, in a way, they still have this mentality where, we still need to depend on the government or other people to make decision instead of we taking charge of our own fate and
That
destiny.
yeah, there are a lot of factors that go into that. Of course, one thing is that we still have all these race-based political parties, which people think are the best way to go about doing it. But uh, there are a few ways to look at it, and I think the fact that we are still being segregated and we're still following the British style, it doesn't really make sense because back then they wanted to do the divide and rule because they wanted to focus on the Indians on the rubber plantation or the Chinese doing the mining and the Malays focusing on agriculture. But things are not like that now. We are all integrated. The Chinese can also do agriculture or do this, and the Indians can also do business, and same goes with the Malays. We're all mixed, and we've come so far from where we were back then, so it doesn't make sense that we're still stuck in that divide and rule mindset that so we're like the Indians are going to stick together, the Malays stick together, the Chinese stick together. I think that we still have a long way to go to complete that integration process that we're so proud of to say.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think she's a really proud woman in a way that I feel empowered by just simply reading her poem. And in fact, she is so confident of herself that some of the quotes, some of the lines that she wrote are actually quite sarcastic towards her tormentor, or in this case, her oppressor, towards her own color. And I think in a lot of lines, she, like the ones that you mentioned, that I'll dance like I've got diamonds at the meeting of my tides, that um, and also bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave. I am the dream and the hope of the slave. In a way, she really want to show that just because I came from a slave past doesn't mean that you can control me anymore. That I do not want to live in terror and fear anymore. I want to be a free woman, and not just a free woman, but a woman that is empowered. And I think it's pretty rare during her era, at that time, where women, regardless is colored or white, was still seen as a second-class gender.
And like you mentioned earlier, of course we are not slaves here, but I guess the other race who are non-Malays do have this being treated as second-class citizen issue, and I think that's also another thing that we can derive from the poem. Take it from her how she remained strong and fought for her people, and she refused to give in. And
But that's the problem, isn't it? Like there's a huge civil rights movement during
Mhm.
her era. She fought alongside prominent leaders, like black leaders like Martin Luther King. And the most important part is she never really bowed down by institutionalization. At that time, the blacks were virtually institutionalized as being a second-class citizen, even though they might have been free after the Civil War, the infamous Civil War
Mhm.
in America. But at the same time, like when I ponder, especially our own country, like, do you do we have we really moved forward? Or are we still bowed down by the institutionalization of all the different mechanism to free ourselves? I mean, for example, like our constitution and our educational institution, and also our government. In a way, regardless whether it's the opposition or it's the current government, seems like the system is almost the same. I mean, the progress is too slow, and individuals have this idea that they are helpless. They are just one lone voice that would not be able to do anything to change the status quo.
I think it also goes back to the feeling of complacency that we have because I think as Malaysians, we are well known for that tidak apa attitude that
The
we
tidak
have.
apa.
So
I mean, you look at our parents in a way. They already embodied that sort of like passiveness in themselves.
Hmm. And like you said, there's no probably no clear civil rights movement or anything that's happening here because we're like, hey, we're in this country and we're living here and we have a job, so why don't we just shut up and be grateful for it? What's the point of fighting or fixing something that's not broken? But I guess they should look at it in a long-term kind of thing, where if you don't address this issue now, sooner or later it's gonna get much worse.
And it's getting much more worse now. Like I can see like some of my friends, they started to be much more I wouldn't say the word racist, but I would say that they started to be more patriotic towards their own race. In a way, they stopped looking themselves as, hey, I'm a Malaysian. If it's not the issue of even if it's not the issue related to my own community or my own race, it's still my issue because I'm a Malaysian, and we all should care about each other rather than thinking that, oh, you have to speak this particular language because it's your mother tongue language, or this is the national language. If you don't know, you're not part of this the citizen of this country. I think this kind of ethnocentrism that's happening within pockets of community is really, really to me is worrying. It's a worrying trend.
I think ethnocentrism is another interesting issue that we could, probably discuss some other time, because I think I will have a lot to say about that.
Similarly to me, I think she also addressed it in her poem. For example, you may kill me with your hatefulness, but still like air I will rise. Shows that even though people might hate your own race, saying a lot of bad words to your own race, but you should not be vengeful. You should rise like air. And I
Yeah.
really admire that. It's really beautiful.
And yeah, I guess ethnocentrism starts at probably because I read this one comedian who said that, hey guys, racism is not born with someone. It's something that is being taught to kids, especially. And then he said that, I have a 5-year-old son. You know what he hates? Naps. That's it. Like he doesn't have this awareness like, oh, okay, this person is colored, this person is this. Kids don't know that, so it's something that definitely that is being taught to the kids, and I think that has to stop first. All this ethnocentrism.
And I like you raised about kids, because guess which country that is already legalized the scrapping of the word race in any of the forms or any of the institutional means, or even in corporation.
Oh, I know it's not Malaysia.
It's Sweden, and
Okay.
I just read it like yesterday, and I thought like, wow, this is a really one leap forward for Sweden to sort of make sure that the word race, to be scrapped off from Swedish legislation. And I think at the end of the day, people like Maya Angelou really put some faith in humanity to me.
Yeah, and we can definitely learn a lot from her poem, or even the way she lived her life, the way she went about doing things and making her stand in society is definitely something that we can learn to emulate and try and improve things in our own country.
So anyway, that's all for today. Thank you for listening to our poetry reading and analysis. Catch us again another 15 minutes for another interesting ABC focus.